listening to the Art of Homeschooling podcast, where we help parents cultivate creativity and connection at home. I'm your host, Jean Miller, and here on this podcast, you'll find stories and inspiration to bring you the confidence you need to make homeschooling work for your family. Let's begin. When my kids were toddlers, I thought they would go to the local public school once they started first grade. I have a master's degree in teaching, and I was a classroom teacher before we decided to homeschool. So my vision was that I would teach at the local school and I'd get to walk my kids to school every morning, and we would all have the summers off. When homeschooling turned out to be the best choice for our family, the thing I was worried about missing the most was the community. Neighbors, friends who were parents of my kids' classmates, other moms to work on projects with and be on committees with even. The truth is that homeschooling can be a bit lonely, and we need to find ways of finding and building community as homeschoolers. Hey there, it's Jean, and welcome to this episode all about community. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 ways to build community as a homeschooler. First, 2 quick caveats. Of course, our ability to gather with others is a bit hampered right now as I record this in these times of COVID. But I know that you will get some really rich ideas that you can implement right away from this episode, as well as a few to tuck away for future days when we can all gather again in groups. Second, our need for community, our desire for community varies a great deal from person to person. Some of us are more comfortable in smaller groups than larger, or even prefer one-on-one. Some of us are more introverts than extroverts. And the wonderful thing about homeschooling is that we can adjust our groups and our communities to meet our needs as well as our families. For me, I love being with other people, and I do my best thinking when I'm in conversation with others. This drives my husband crazy, but then I also need a lot of downtime to fill back up, to refuel. So I need to take all that into account when I plan or even agree to any kind of group activities. So I just encourage you to get in touch with what you need, as well as what your kids need as you're listening in today. Please remember that group work is really important to all of us, right? No matter what our personality might be or our personal needs might be. I say this to my kids all the time. Our personal growth happens in relationships. Okay, so let's dive into how homeschoolers can find and build community. As homeschoolers, we don't have the traditional classroom of community, of course, but we can strive for an experience of wholeness within our own families. Our first community really is our family. That's the most important one. And so while in a school, a teacher might focus on building a sense of community among the students, among the classmates, at home, we can think of our immediate family as the community and look for ways to strengthen those bonds. I love this quote by Rudolf Steiner, the founder of the very first Waldorf school, where he was really committed to this idea of building community. Here's what he said: "A healthy social life is found only when in the mirror of each soul, the whole community finds its reflection. and when in the whole community, the virtue of each one is living. That's such a beautiful idea to play around with as we think about our family as the community and then additional gatherings that we might organize or participate in with other families. So my kids are all grown now, but here in this episode, I want to share with you some of our group experiences throughout the years of our homeschooling. And as I said in the beginning, this was really important to me. So I wanted to be sure for each of my 3 kids that we had some experiences of community with other homeschooling families and outside, the broader community in our area as well. So here are just some things that worked for us, ways of finding like-minded friends, of gathering together that met my needs and my kids' needs for wonderful friendships and a sense of community. Here we go, 3 ways to find community as a homeschooler. Number 1, start a play group or a co-op. Number 2, join a homeschooling group. And number 3, join an online community. So how we form groups really depends a lot on the ages of our children, the stage of life we're in, and the stage that they're in their growth and development. Consider what you want and need right now, and then also what you think your children want and need right now. Then you can begin talking to other homeschooling parents about what they might be interested in. But I encourage you to think about, try to get some clarity on what you want first. Do you want a play group? Do you want a homeschooling grades group where some lessons actually take place? Perhaps you want a seasonal festival group or a handwork group for moms. You could have one that includes the children or a mom's night out type of thing where you meet in the evenings. Do you want a singing group or a book club? These are just some ideas for you to begin to consider. So now I just want to go a little more deeply and share some examples from each of these 3 ways that you can build community as a homeschooler. The first one I mentioned is start a playgroup or co-op. These are often best if they're kept relatively small, right? Just a small group of like-minded families. Even gathering with just 1 or 2 other families with kids of similar ages to yours works really well, especially right now. In my experience, gathering once a week is a really good idea. Sometimes we think we want more than that, but I will tell you that in order for you to feel like you have some time at home with your own kids, and in order for this to be sustainable over a long period of time, once a week actually works really well. In my own experience, as well as talking to lots and lots of other homeschooling parents. So the focus for your playgroup or co-op could be handwork projects. It could be stories with projects. It could be gathering to prepare for festivals, for festival celebrations like a lantern festival or May Day or something like that. And in these times of COVID, gathering in this little small bubble of families outdoors can be a really good idea. So start by having conversations with adults or moms and other homeschooling parents, and then decide on a form and structure for your group. Like, how often do you want to meet? Where do you want to meet? And for how long? How many hours? Who will lead the activities? Keeping things short and just a few hours, especially for younger kids, works best. Groups can be overstimulating, right? They can be very stimulating for young children, and we want that, but we don't want to overdo it. It can work well to, like, it's better to leave before things start to fall apart. So it can work well to meet maybe for 2 hours and share responsibility among the parents. So each parent could take on the responsibility of planning and leading a different activity. Some examples of this from my own life. The first group that I helped form was called Bridgeways, and we actually hired teachers for different age groups. This is when I got to really know my mentor, Barbara Dewey, because she came and led a group for like a mixed age group, but a variety, like 4 different ages over a period of 7 years, I think. Then we had a group called Rainbow's Edge when my daughter was in elementary school. And in that group, it was a co-op. So each of the parents taught a main lesson. We still only met once a week, but we each taught a main lesson to a small group of kids. So we would gather together for a circle and an opening, and then go split off into 2 or 3 different age groups with a different parent leading those, and then come back together for lunch and a hike. If you want more information about this, I should have grabbed the URL, but on my website, you could do a search for Homeschooling Enrichment Program. And one of my mentors and friends has created a group. Sarah has created actually a number of homeschooling enrichment programs in different cities, and you can read all about how she did that. Super fun. That's a much larger scale. Our Bridgeways group and our Rainbow's Edge group, I mean, we had anywhere from, 6 kids to 12 kids. So it was not a large group. The Bridgeways group was larger than that. So you get to decide. You might also just meet to go for a hike or something like that. One year we had a group that we called One Trail 12 Times. And once a month we would gather with other homeschooling families and go for a hike on the same trail and observe how things changed through the seasons. Here are just a few other tips based on my own experience, things that you might not think about until you really get into this. So one is that moms tend to want to linger and talk, right? We crave friendships and some time to visit with other homeschooling parents. This is not a co-op or a play group is not really the time for this. I encourage you to actually talk about this and encourage each other to leave promptly when the activities are over or at your end time in order to avoid meltdowns on the part of the kids. I also encourage moms, when we've gotten together with other parents, we needed to have a conversation about avoiding bringing too much complaining energy to the group, because sometimes this is like our outlet for talking about how homeschooling is going, or our only kind of adult contact. And this is best saved for adult-only times and getting together or having conversations over the phone. And my last tip is, this is really funny, be sure that the crafts and the activities are age appropriate, developmentally appropriate for your children. We spent so many years, I think our very first attempt at a play group, my boys were maybe 2 and 3 years old. And I remember so distinctly how much time we had put into all the planning for this play group. And when we finally got together, we had these elaborate ideas for activities. And I think that the children lasted about 5 minutes on, we were working on making these little tiny pine cone people. And the kids were so young. It just was not, this was an activity that maybe 7 or 8 or 9-year-olds could do. We were trying to do it with 2 and 3-year-olds. And, the kids lasted about 5 minutes. The mom sat there, right, feeling obligated to finish the project. But wrapping our adult minds around simplicity and being age appropriate can be really challenging, especially when we have these strong desires for building something, for creating community. All right, way number two that you can join, that you can create community is to join or start a homeschooling group. And this might be a larger, more eclectic group of homeschoolers, but those can be fun too. We can gain a lot from, just meeting other people and hearing about how they approach homeschooling and things like that. So one year we created a larger group, a homeschooling group like this. We met once a week on Fridays, and by the time year two rolled around, I think we had more than between 30 and 40 families. And we met in the social hall of an old church in the city of Cleveland. It was this huge, gorgeous church where there was like one great room with space where we could gather as a whole group. But then there were smaller rooms off the social hall they were so beautiful. They each had these huge old windows and wood framed chalkboards, and they were just the perfect size. So it even had this little stage up front for performances in the social hall. We had a lot of fun there. We met once a week, and and parents would rotate through teaching classes, and then the kids would choose. That was really fun. So we'd have these 12-week sessions, and it was great for the kids to have some choice in what they wanted to participate in. I remember teaching a puppet theater class, a bird watching in the city class. Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. Creative writing. And then my daughter got to choose. The boys were older by this point, but my daughter got to choose whatever classes she wanted to take. And some of her favorites were, there was a duct tape projects class. There was a no-sew holiday gift making class. Super fun. These large gatherings, these large communities can be a bit overwhelming, especially when you have younger children. So there was a group like this that existed when my boys were in the elementary grades, but we did not choose to participate because I had a toddler and it was just too much. It was not something that that I could really do, and my kids, I think, would have felt really overstimulated and overwhelmed too. So pay attention to that, because even with this bigger homeschooling group, we needed to make sure the next day after our group gathering, we had a down day to, some downtime to recover our energy. A simpler version of this might be just to gather once in a while with other homeschooling families to share what the kids are learning. We did this for years. We had something called potluck presentations, just once a month, and we would gather with other families. We would rotate homes. I think there were about maybe 10 to 12 families who were involved, but it would shift some through the years. And the kids got to, stand up and present whatever they wanted. So they could recite a poem they memorized, or share a painting, or read a report, or show a map that they made, or something like that. And it was really fun and a really great way for the families to get to know each other through the years. A few other ideas. For a few years, we held an art show at the end of our homeschooling year where the kids could exhibit their visual art, but also we had performing arts. So they could put on a skit or a play or perform some music. It's so enriching to have a way for children to share their work beyond your family. And then also for them to see, and for you to see, all the interesting and amazing things that other homeschooled kids are working on. What I found over the years was that if something like this didn't exist, I got together with one or two other homeschooling moms and we created it. Sometimes that's what it takes. So remember to keep it simple. These kinds of gatherings, though, can really help to build a strong homeschooling community locally in your area. And right now during COVID, finding ways for these gatherings to happen outside is an added challenge, but can be really nice, actually. And it's a refreshing way, right, to reframe some of these structures, these forms that we've experienced or might want to experience. We gathered with other homeschooling families for a number of years to celebrate seasonal festivals, and these were always outside at a local park that had a fireplace. And we live in northeastern Ohio, so it's cold here in the winter. But we had, and even the fall and spring, right? But we had many a lantern festival, solstice spiral, and May Day celebration. And this group became my kids' school community through the years. It was one that I was just so sad to give up, right? And I mean, when my kids graduated, I missed these celebrations so much. And this really met my need for, like I said in the beginning, I just wanted this little nice, sweet school community. And choosing to homeschool, sometimes we have to create it ourselves, but it's really worth it. All right, and the third way that I want to mention to build community is to join an online community. In this time of COVID, online friends have become ever so important. I know we might think they're not necessarily ideal, and I am not proposing that we spend hours every day online or on our phones, but with so many activities canceled and gatherings canceled or limited to just outdoor activities, I find that especially for adults, having a group of homeschooling parents to share with, to get support from, can really make a huge difference in the quality of our lives. I have one example of this in my own life. I'm not homeschooling anymore because my kids have all graduated, but I have an accountability partner in a yoga group that I'm in. So shout out to Dana. Hey, Dana, if you're listening, she and I check in with each other every day during the week, and we share goals, we share successes and challenges for living a healthier life, and we've become dear friends. And it's just a super quick check-in every morning. So either with a group or even just one friend, as I've said, it's great to have weekly or daily check-ins to share reflections, to share homeschooling wins, and get input, right, on your challenges. We all need support and a few friends on our journey. If you want to join a wonderful community of like-minded mamas, I invite you to consider joining Homeschool with Waldorf. This is a monthly membership that I started 2 years ago. We just celebrated our 2-year anniversary, that you can join anytime to become part of an amazing community that will help you stay the course and feel better about yourself along the way. It's a place where you can get support, training, and community when you need it most. One of my favorite things about Homeschool with Waldorf is the weekly calls. So every Thursday we gather for coaching and sharing. And these calls, the group has just become so incredibly close, and we have people from all over the world. It's a great way for you to get not only training, like learn about how to homeschool in the day-to-day, simple, practical, time-tested strategies, but also get support for you, the support that you need for yourself. So you can check out all the details at artofhomeschooling.com/homeschool with Waldorf. Now, I just have a few final thoughts for you on building community. So this idea of a group as a social organism, as I mentioned, Rudolf Steiner talked a lot about this when he created the first Waldorf school, but any of us can apply this to our lives. This idea that we want to consciously engage in group work, right? And in our social life. So that group, it could be any setting. You could consider it your family, a play group, a co-op, a festival group, as I've mentioned. But we want to think in terms of feeding this social organism and nourishing the whole of the group. As a homeschooler, I really also appreciate the accountability of a group. We don't get a lot of that in homeschooling, right? We aren't accountable. There isn't somebody higher than us in the hierarchy that we're accountable to. So I love a group for being, showing up as my best self, showing up on time, right? Doing my part. In homeschooling, flexibility of time and space is a true asset, definitely, but it can also be a hindrance, right? Some days can be, there's almost too much flexibility. There's so much freedom in homeschooling, and that's a huge draw for all of us, I think, but we also long for community. So building community can meet our need for our own personal need for adult interaction. My observation also for kids, I think it's really important. I've observed so many kids who, this is an interesting observation, I think, that homeschooled kids tend to feel entitled to or accustomed to speaking whenever they have an idea, right? They have an idea and they're going to share it. Especially if they, this may not be so true if you have a large family, but in smaller families, homeschooled kids, they haven't been in a classroom where they have to wait their turn, right? So group work can really help curb this habit. It's kind of the opposite for schooled kids, right? Schooled kids often turn off their idea generation in their minds because they can't pursue them now. And especially some kids, don't want to compete with a large group of people just for airtime. But homeschooled kids, it's almost the opposite, where they feel like, oh, they're just going to say whatever is on their mind when it's on their mind. And I think the ideal is somewhere in between. So homeschooling is the best setting, in my opinion, for learning. But I also think gathering in groups is really good for all of us. When we only have one child, groups can be extremely important, right? I have 3 kids, but our youngest was almost like an only child in her upper elementary and high school years because the boys were grown and off on their own. So only children really, I think they need to experience more of this give and take in daily life than they often get at home. And families with more than one child, groups can give everyone a break from the sibling dynamics for sure, and give kids an opportunity to navigate relationships outside of the home. And then community building, it takes different forms, but as homeschoolers, we have the freedom to determine what those forms might be. And as I said in the beginning, our growth as a human being happens in relationships. So just remember that community building is deep work, right? It's often rewarding and renewing. It is sometimes challenging. So consider that there will be challenges in whatever groups you gather in, just like there are in your family. So think about, it's good to plan ahead, right, for conflict resolution from the get-go if you're creating a new group. But I just want to come back to this idea that we want to consider community for what our needs are, for gathering with other adults, and for friendship with other like-minded homeschooling mamas, and then consider what our children's needs are. And that's based on what the constellation of our family is, how old they are, and what their personality is for, or needs are for interacting with others. So all of that comes into play. And I just want to remind you that if you want support around these ideas, but also support for yourself on your homeschooling journey, do check out Homeschool with Waldorf. We would love to have you join and be part of this amazing worldwide community of homeschoolers. So remember this, homeschooling is a journey. I encourage you to ask yourself this question. I just have a question to leave you with. How do we put into place structures that feed our souls and allow us to be co-creative with others on a similar path. I hope that I've given you some ideas to inspire you personally as you continue on your path of homeschooling and as you work on building community in your life. Thanks so much for listening in today, and I will see you next time.
That's all for today, my friend. But here's what I want you to remember. Rather than perfection, let's focus on connection. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast.